The twins desperately needed some downtime. They'd been working tirelessly to get their new clothing line into stores before the deadline, and the 80-hour work weeks were beginning to get to them. They were constantly at each other's throats over extraneous tasks that didn't much matter in the grand scheme of things. Sadie was slumped in the passenger seat, purposely ignoring Sally on the drive home, when they happened upon the most stunning expanse of woods she'd ever seen. She immediately sat upright and motioned for her sister to pull over. At only 21, the twins were veteran backpackers, constantly in search of new territory to explore. They were enchanted upon exiting the vehicle and peering into the archway. It all looked so serene and inviting, just what they needed to help them unwind after an exhilarating yet grueling 12 months. Sadie shot her sister a look, and the sly grin on Sally's face gave her the answer she sought. Without uttering a single word, Sally locked the truck, engaged the alarm, and the two struck out into the woods on what would turn out to be the adventure of a lifetime, provided they lived to tell anybody. The colorful array of foliage captivated the girls as they ventured deeper into uncharted territory. But despite her anticipation, 5 minutes into their spur-of-the-moment excursion, Sally began to have reservations. "Sis, we should be heading home. We're totally unprepared. We don't have our backpacks, and we haven't even left any markers, so we can't be sure of the way out." "Don't be such a baby," Sadie admonished. "We'll just go back the way we came. Seems simple enough to me." Sally refused to go any further. She stopped, folded her arms, and persisted. "I mean it, Sadie. Let's go. Now." Sadie rolled her eyes and retorted, "No. You know, just because you're the oldest doesn't mean that you're the boss of me." Sally angrily bit back, "And just because you're the youngest doesn't mean that you always get to have your way. Now I'm going. You coming or not?" Without looking behind her, Sadie sarcastically replied, "Not," and kept walking. "Fine," Sally countered, then turned and stormed off in the direction of their vehicle. "She'll give in." "She always does," Sadie murmured, as she waded deeper into the woods, though at a much slower pace now. "I could just wring her scrawny neck," Sally exclaimed. Dealing with Sadie was often infuriating, but that was her sister and she loved her. So she did what she'd always done. She gave in and set off to find Sadie, but immediately realized that the forestry around her looked completely different than it had a few seconds ago. There was a massive tree that she's certain wasn't there before. In another part of the woods, Sadie felt a strange sense of foreboding. The sun was setting, and she kept looking back, expecting to see her sister at any minute. Sally wasn't giving in this time, and for once, winning didn't matter to Sadie. She was afraid. She turned to hurry in the direction she'd seen her sister go, but there was a hedge where the path ought to have been. The twins, though at a distance, each experienced a heightened sense of each other's presence. Sadie was drawn to the hedge on her right. She was convinced that Sally was there, even though she couldn't see her. Sally was drawn to the massive tree directly on her left. She was so sure that Sadie was near, until it baffled her that Sadie wasn't standing there when she turned to look once more. If it's true that twins can feel each other's pain, and if it's true that they can communicate intuitively with one another in dire circumstances, then that would explain their actions and reactions to what happened next. Sally closed her eyes to contemplate her next move, and when she opened them, there was a path where the massive tree had been a split second before. Sadie hadn't closed her eyes. She'd only looked away for an instant, and when she turned her head to the left again, the hedge had been replaced with a beautiful patch of plant life. The girls cut their teeth on brain teasers, so unconventional thinking was their forte. This would be a cakewalk, as long as they made the right move at precisely the right moment. They paused simultaneously to get their bearings, carefully assessed their surroundings, and concluded that they'd wandered into some sort of matrix. They would have to maneuver as one unit if they were going to make it out of these woods intact. Each one closed their eyes, took a deep breath to steady their nerves, and then opened their eyes and observed. After witnessing a few more shifts and timing them, the girls deduced that the modifications were happening at 3-minute intervals. It was 5:02 when the girls, still intuitively linked, synchronized their watches, and then neither of them moved a muscle for 3 whole minutes. At precisely 5:05 p.m., Sally turned to her right and ran towards what was now a lovely bed of roses, and Sadie turned to her left and ran headlong into a knotted mass of vines. When the dust settled, they were in each other's arms, with only seconds to spare before their surroundings shifted again right before their eyes. The enchanted forest had ensnared its prey. Sadie began to sob and cling to her big sister, but Sally was having none of it. "Come on, Sadie. We've got to keep going. We cannot give up now." She held her sister's face between her hands and said, "We'll get out of here. I promise. Now on the count of 3, jump." It's been 20 years since the twins' parents found their abandoned truck on the side of the road. No one has seen or heard from them since that Friday afternoon in June, just 3 days before the huge launch party that would have made them a household name in the fashion industry. The girls would be 41 years old now. Their parents didn't see any plausible reason for the girls to stop on this particular stretch of road, because at the time, there was nothing out there but a dusty old lot where construction workers dumped their unwanted topsoil. In fact, there was nothing around for miles.